Well, good afternoon, folks. I am so happy to be back with you once again in the luxurious, capacious studios of WHRO and Hampton Roads Public Radio for another Talk About Opera, the upcoming production soon to open at the Harrison Opera House of Puccini's seventh opera, The Girl of the Golden West, as we're calling it, or as Giacomo would have called it, La Fanciulla del West. This is an opera that was born of two coinciding, basically simultaneous events in American history. And we have to talk about those two events a little bit because they have a direct bearing not just on the plot of this opera, but on the way the music sounds and how the music was shaped and what the music means. We're going to be spending some time with the orchestral prelude to Act One of Girl of the Golden West. It's not a full-length overture, it's just 70 seconds in length, but it really functions as kind of a thumbnail of the entire work, giving you a concise summation of the themes and what's going to happen to one of the main characters. But first, a little bit of that history lesson. We need to go back to the American West in the beginning of the year 1848. In January of 1848, some fellows out there in the California Territory, it was not yet a state, were fishing around in a riverbed and they found some shiny rocks. And yeah, it turned out that there was gold in them there hills. This is up in the mountainous area, not in Southern California. And within a few weeks, President James K. Polk came out with the breaking news that yes, there is gold in California, and suddenly the race was on from fortune seekers from this country, from South America, from Europe, all of whom wanted to come out west and pick up as many shiny rocks as they could and make their fortune in an event that came to be known as the California Gold Rush. That was January of 1848. Now, the next month, in February 1848, was the end of the Mexican-American War. There had been an armed dispute, an armed conflict, over which nation would take control of the California territory, Mexico or the United States. And with the cessation of these hostilities, it was established that California would be a United States territory. But this left simmering racial tensions that have persisted through, well, really up through the present day. Look at some of the headlines about how we are interacting with our southern neighbors, Mexico. Really, these racial tensions form one of the highlights. It's really the crux of Puccini's opera, with the society composed of a kind of a strata, a caste system. At the top were the Americans, below them were the Mexicans, who had much resentment over what the Americans were doing. And of course, at the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak, were the Native Americans, who were regarded with quite a bit of dismissiveness by both Mexicans and Americans. Now, back to that gold rush. You know, it was kind of difficult to get out there. America did not have a transcontinental railroad in 1848. So how were you going to get there? If there's no train, I guess you take a covered wagon or a stagecoach. Folks, that was an arduous journey. There was no sure route through the Rocky Mountains, and you had to deal with unsettled wilderness to get out there and hostile native tribes. So there was no picnic. Many people took a seagoing route, and believe it or not, there would be some people maybe who lived in New England and Boston who might hop on a steamship and go all the way down past Cape Horn at the tip of South America and come up the other side. And of course, that could take hours. I'm kidding. That could take months. Other people would sail through the Caribbean, get off at Panama, and hack their way through wilderness jungles to the west coast of Panama, and then make their way up a seagoing route up there. So difficult to get there, and that means that once you're there, you're not going anywhere. You're not going to commute back home on the weekends to Charleston or Florida. You are there for better or for worse. You might make your fortune. Most people didn't. You might break even. That's what a lot of people did. Or you might lose money and lose everything. due to claim jumpers. And that's the other thing about being up there in the California mountainous territory. It was wilderness. The weather conditions were extreme. The David Belasco play, The Girl of the Golden West, on which Puccini based his opera, had a fabulous special effect in Act Two in Minnie's cabin that required 36 stagehands to operate wind machines and snow machines as they simulated a blizzard. And this was a reflection of what actually happened. We're not talking about Southern California with a balmy 72 degrees. We're talking about a very arduous, harsh physical environment, not much food to eat. There was also the harshness of the society in that without a state government, law and order was kind of chaotic. People were killed as they took their gold nuggets to be essayed or to be deposited in a bank. There were claim jumpers, a lot of lynchings and hangings, and this is an element that's also reflected in Puccini's opera. And there was loneliness. Since you were out there with no prospect of returning to your home anytime soon, there were no women out there, but very few to speak of. It was no kind of environment for a woman in the opinion of these fortune seekers. There was a widespread homesickness and loneliness, suffering, hunger. Some people starved. And all of this is reflected in the opening moments of the prelude to Act One. Now, we're going to hear the whole prelude, but first I want to break it down into the principal motifs. There are three themes or motifs that we hear, and I want you to listen to them one by one. This first one begins with a big orchestral flourish and then a sustained chord, which is that same sonority that the triad slides down the orchestra in a kind of a chaotic free fall and then is repeated. It sounds like this, and we'll talk about it on the other side. Now, that opening was intended to sound chaotic. You can't tell what key that music is in. Chords are kind of tonally unhinged. They're what we music theorists would call augmented chords, and they don't establish a tonal center. You can't tell what key you're in, which gives it a kind of a wild and unhinged and chaotic feel. And that is Puccini's attempt in music to depict that harsh environment that I was talking about. Now, that is followed immediately by the contrasting theme, the yang to the yin of the opening motive. This next motive is ascending in its directionality. The first theme went downward, da, 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 da. This next one is going to climb up, and it is intended to represent the opposite of disorder, chaos, harshness, and so forth. It's going to reflect order, and I would even go so far as to use the word redemption, and I'll tell you why redemption enters into it after we hear that theme. Now, back to the chaos theme. Puccini extends the meaning of that opening theme past the idea of a physical harshness and a physical wilderness to a spiritual harshness and a spiritual wilderness, to the chaos of the human heart, which theologians might sum up with the word sin. So where there is disorder, chaos, and sin, we have the aspiration in this opera of finding order and redemption. And who is it that's going to be redeemed? Well, it's actually not the girl of the Golden West. She's the title character, but she's not the character in conflict. The final theme that we hear at the very end of the prelude has a kind of a Latin, jazzy, dance-like feel. It's almost kind of a foxtrot, and it stands for the character who has this duality of disorder, of sin, and the quest for redemption. And that is Dick Johnson, the tenor, who has an alter ego known as the bandit Ramirez. And here is his theme. what this means is that in this prelude, we not only have established the themes of disorder, chaos, order, and redemption, but Puccini indicates which character is going to be the subject of this transformation from one state to the other, and that is Ramirez, a.k.a. Dick Johnson. This also shows us, just in the first few seconds of the opera, how the racial tensions are reflected in Puccini's work, because Dick has this duality. He is both Mexican, with the identity of Ramirez, and he is American with his identity of Dick Johnson. He is the one with this duality. It is the racial tension reflected in one man, a problem that he will have to resolve by the end of the show. So here is this thumbnail. Now let's listen to the complete 70-second prelude. You'll hear back and forth of disorder and order twice, followed by Ramirez's theme, as Puccini gives us a musical thumbnail. And as this preview or discussion of La Fanciulla del West, the Girl of the Golden West, continues, you'll hear a few examples of how those themes return and are woven into the fabric of the music at key moments of psychology. Now, the first musical number, the first notable vocal solo, is a departure for Puccini when you consider the model of his previous operas. Who got to sing the first important arias in his previous hit operas? Well, in Manon Lescaut, it was the tenor, the Chevalier de Grieux, who sings an aria at the top of Act 1. In La Bohème, Rodolfo gets the first big aria, Che gelida manina. He's the tenor hero. In Tosca, the tenor hero, Mario Cavaradossi, sings an aria soon after the curtain goes up. And in Madame Butterfly, it is the tenor, not the hero, but the tenor lead character, Lieutenant Pinkerton, who gets the first aria. The first vocal solo in Girl of the Golden West is given to a minor character, not a gold miner, but a character who makes a brief appearance, sings a beautiful song, and then is never seen again. What an odd choice. You would be within your rights to think that Jake Wallace, the minstrel of the mining community, must be a pretty important guy because he has a gorgeous solo to sing. But there's a reason that we have this from a minor character instead of from one of the principals. Let's hear a little bit of it. A lot of, until pretty recently, until the 1990s, everybody assumes that this song, Che faranno I vecchi miei, was an attempt by Puccini to simulate the ballads of Stephen Foster, whose songs were a part of the David Belasco play, The Girl of the Golden West. And as you listen to Jake sing these nostalgic words, what will the old folks at home do if I never return? What will my old mother do if I never return? You can see that there is kind of the suggestion of a nostalgic Stephen Foster ballad. As we will see, however, it turns out to be something very much different in origin. But listen to Jake sing a gorgeous melody.
Jack Wallace, il cantastorie del campo.
How she'll weep, quanto piangerà, my old mother back home. Well, you can see how people might have been a little confused and thought that Puccini was referencing songs like Swanee River, The Old Folks at Home, My Old Kentucky Home. It has that ambiance, doesn't it? But Jake Wallace's song has a much different origin. Puccini had great success in Madama Butterfly with incorporating some authentic Japanese folk melodies into the music, a number of them. And he wanted to do something similar to infuse The Girl of the Golden West with a true, authentic quality of musical materials. So he asked his friend and confidant, Sybil Seligman, a British woman, to collect some Native American tunes for him. And Sybil did this. One of these turned out to be a song from the Zuni Indian tribe. Now, this was not discovered until the 1990s when a scholar named Alan Atlas published an article in the Musical Quarterly, a scholarly journal, demonstrating that Jake Wallace's song is derived directly from a sun god festival dance sung by the Zuni Indians. Now, I looked all over the internet, opera lovers, for an audio file of a Zuni Indian shaman singing the original version of Jake's song. I couldn't find that, but I did stumble onto the next best thing. The Lakota Indians also had a tribal dance to the sun god that was done every summer, and I do have a recording of that. Now, this is going to sound that way that we're accustomed to hearing Indian shamans sing. It's not a style of singing that is one that was familiar to Western ears unless you see a lot of cowboy movies. But listen to this, and I think you can hear the seeds, the kernel of a musical material that could be turned into a Western-style tune. So here's a Lakota Indian shaman singing his Sundance song. Now, I think it's easy to see how that could be turned into a Western-style folk tune. Dee da 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 dee da 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 da, which is not far removed from the song in Act 1 of Girl of the Golden West. What we have to understand is there is a little problem with political correctness in the way that Puccini has handled this. I'm not sure that members of the Zuni Indian tribe today would feel very flattered by what has happened to their sacred dance song in praise of the sun god. Because on December 10th, 1910, when Girl of the Golden West had its world premiere at the Metropolitan Opera House in New York, this song was performed by an Italian bass singing in blackface as an African-American minstrel, this Zuni Indian sacred song. And the other thing that's unfortunate is that Puccini was not too concerned with American geography. The Zuni Indians were not located in the mountainous California gold country. They were actually in the southwest desert area in Arizona, New Mexico. So I think we have to be careful here. We can be regretful about the way that it was handled in the original staging. But Puccini was trying to be respectful of American culture and the roots of American culture. He thought he was doing a good thing. And let's face it, political correctness was in a highly embryonic stage at the turn of the 20th century. Women didn't have the right to vote yet, and there were Jim Crow laws still in effect in our society. And let's face it, we still haven't conquered all aspects of treating every kind of group, race, and ethnicity with the respect that they deserve. We're still not perfect at it. And this is a bit of an imperfection, but it is such a beautiful and haunting piece of music. And the reason we have it is, again, Puccini is trying to show the isolation of these men, the rigorous life that they chose in search of shiny gold rocks in the stream beds. And they all burst into tears when they hear this. This song pushes the buttons of the men's chorus that makes up the minors listening to Jake sing. And it certainly is a highlight of Act 1. Well, we need to meet our title character, Minnie, the girl of the Golden West. She's the owner of the Polka Saloon where Act 1 takes place. She serves up whiskey and cigars and whatever she can find for supper and allows poker games to go on. And that's the alternative. Nice guys choose. Some of the guys choose to go to Nina Micheltorena's cat house down the road and do things that they wouldn't want their girlfriends back home to know about. And Minnie is kind of the glue that holds this mining camp community together. She is not just the barkeeper and saloon owner. She is the social worker, the nurse who gives them chicken broth when they're sick. She's their banker. She's their loan officer. She's their big sister. She's their pinup girl, the one that they all wish that they could date or marry. She is the glue that keeps them from falling into complete chaos. When she makes her entrance, it's wonderful. She breaks up a fight among a couple of guys who are angry about card games and other issues, and she comes in with her 6-gun blazing, and the orchestra breaks into the theme that will be Minnie's theme. Now, the thing to notice about Minnie's theme is how musically it contrasts from the preceding themes that we've heard. All the other themes, the chaos and wilderness theme, dee da 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 da, the redemption theme, da 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 da, and Jake Wallace's Indian tune, dee da 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 da. They all move by small intervals, pretty much stepwise, seconds and thirds on the piano keyboard. Minnie's theme, in contrast, is made up of wide intervals. Dee da 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 da. And I think that this has a rather plain and obvious meaning. It shows us that Minnie has a heart as big and wide as all outdoors. It's really pretty much that simple. It's to show the generous nature of her personality and her character. Minnie is a character unlike any of Puccini's other sopranos. She's not dying. She's not coughing. She doesn't have TB. She's not pathologically jealous like Tosca over nothing. She's not in torment like Cho-Cho-san being rejected by her native people, her family, and abandoned by her husband. Minnie loves her life. Minnie's a big, healthy, happy American girl. To put it another way, Minnie's as corny as Kansas in August. Minnie's as normal as blueberry pie. And this was a different kind of soprano character for Puccini to contend with. And it's a different kind of soprano role. Minnie is a great role. It requires Meryl Streep-level acting skills, and she has some thrilling vocal climaxes. One thing she does not have is standalone arias that are done in concerts that you would recognize. And you can't say that about any other Puccini sopranos. Manon Lescaut has Sola perduta abbandonata in her death scene. Mimi has Mi chiamano Mimi and other solos. Tosca has Vissi d'arte. Cho-Cho-san has Un bel dì. All of these are iconic soprano repertoire that you hear not only in productions of the operas, but standalone in concerts and recordings. You can take them out of the context of the opera. You can't do that with Minnie. Now, I'm going to play you the end of her first solo. I'm not even sure I would call it an aria. It's called Laggiù nel Soledad. She's describing to Jack Rance, the sheriff, the happy marriage of her mother and father and how she longs to have a husband like her mother had, somebody who will be her best friend. I'll tell you why this happens. Puccini had been studying Wagner, notably Parsifal, and Richard Strauss, notably Salome, in which the vocal solos are not standalone arias in which the end of the aria is marked by a pause to allow the audience to clap. Puccini made sure that the music keeps going after the end of the vocal solos in this aria, after Minnie's arias. And you'll hear Sheriff Jack Rance leap right in after she sings her final notes of this solo, thus preventing the audience from bursting into the applause that they were probably expecting. Puccini had become more Germanic in his processes, and it makes it more difficult for Minnie's arias to stand alone. Here's the end of Laggiù nel Soledad. Audiences didn't know what to do. They were kind of bumfuzzled. That was a major solo with a climactic ending, sung there by Renato Tebaldi, but Jack Rance did not allow the character to get her expected ovation. That happens throughout. Let's hear another example of Minnie's vocal solos. She gathers the miners around her at one point to teach them a Bible lesson. That's the other thing. Besides being a nurse and a banker and a social worker, she's their school marm and their Sunday school teacher. And she has a lovely solo in which she's explaining the Psalms. They read through Psalm 51, and Minnie is going to explain to them that the lesson of David's psalm is that there is no sinner who is such a goner that he cannot be redeemed by God. I want you to listen for a couple of aspects of this solo. Number one, notice that it is absolutely lovely. There's nothing wrong with it. This is beautiful music in the best Puccini vein, but it's not something that you could easily take outside the context of the opera and do as a solo. It isn't dramatic in that manner to make a concert piece. It is not as compelling as A Woman at the End of Her Rope like Cho-Cho-san or Tosca. It's simply a lovely, idyllic passage in which we see the chastity and the virtue and the gentleness of this character. I also want you to notice how the chaos and wilderness theme that we discussed at length at the beginning of this program returns as she mentions to the miners about sinners, the peccatori. You can listen for that word. When she talks about sinful hearts, then we hear that wilderness chaotic theme, again reminding us that Puccini uses this motif not just to depict the harsh physical conditions, but the harsh spiritual quality of these men in such a remote location. So here's Minnie's Bible lesson. Absolutely beautiful, but really more of a monologue than an aria, so to speak. Minnie is not the soul in torment, and it's souls in torment that an Italian opera usually get the arias that attain immortality in their status in the repertoire. That's going to be left to the guy who is in torment. That's Dick Johnson, who enters in his secret identity as the American Dick. He and Minnie have a history together, and they begin flirting, much to the annoyance of Sheriff Jack Rance, who kind of has his eye on Minnie. They're going to dance, and the time will come when Dick is going to declare his love for her, that she's the girl for him. You can see that Puccini, who always knows how to write for the tenor voice, is going to give Dick the moments of vocal virtuosity and compelling drama that audiences always want from a Puccini opera. Here he is laying bare his soul and telling Minnie how he feels about her in a glorious vocal moment. Now, as you listen to that, perhaps your ears perked up and perhaps your eyebrows raised at a certain point, because you may have heard a phrase that reminded you of something else, something more familiar to music theater lovers, and you'd be exactly right. It's fairly well known that the song Music from the Night from Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom of the Opera kind of helps itself to one of the climactic phrases from that Quello che tacete that you just heard from Puccini. See if you can pick out that little bit of cloning here from the Broadway musical.
Hear it closing in around you. Open up your mind, let your fantasies unwind in this darkness which you know.
Now, whether that was a conscious or unconscious bit of cloning is not for me to say, but it's not the only time that Mr. Webber has raised suspicions of borrowing from other composers. He's even been taken to court on the issue. Act 2 is interesting to me in that Puccini borrows from the structure of his two previous operas. The beginning of Act 2 is very similar to the beginning to Act 2 of Madame Butterfly, and the conclusion of Act 2 of Girl of the Golden West uses the structure and the personal relationships of the characters from the second act of Tosca. In Madame Butterfly, Cho-Cho-san is joyously awaiting the return of her husband, Lieutenant Pinkerton, once she sights his ship in the harbor off the coast of Nagasaki. And she and her mezzo-soprano maid, Suzuki, are rapturously decorating the house with the flower duet and so forth, awaiting his return. But of course, when Lieutenant Pinkerton arrives, it turns out to be a big disappointment because he's married to an American girl, and guess what? They want to take her baby. Well, in Girl of the Golden West, Minnie is awaiting one final, she's going to have a kind of a date, I guess you could say, with Dick Johnson before he leaves the territory. And she and her mezzo-soprano maid, the Indian squaw Mwakla, are joyously decorating their house and laying out a snack and primping and getting ready for the arrival of the tenor. And when he comes, it's a big disappointment because Minnie is going to find out that he is, in fact, the bandit Ramirez, and that, oh, by the way, his lover was that awful Mexican woman, Nina Mitchell-Torrena. While Dick shows up, at first everything is good. They're enjoying some tea and some cookies and so forth, and they're talking about their lives. And Minnie has another of her quasi-arias, an extended solo in which she describes the joy that she has in her life up in the mountains. She loves her life. She has a little pony, and they ride through fields of flowers every morning together. And listen carefully to this. Again, notice that the music is lovely. It's very attractive. It's memorable. But it is not something that you ever hear outside the context of the opera because it expresses no torment. There is no conflict. There is nothing dramatically compelling about it. It is simply a lovely vocal moment sung by a happy girl. Now, the high point of their date before it all goes south is when Dick asks her for un bacio, a kiss. He actually asks 3 times, and that's something to listen for if you come to see our show, because the fact that Dick asks for un bacio 3 times is an homage that Puccini was paying to his mentor that inspired him to go into the opera field, Giuseppe Verdi. Because in Verdi's opera Otello, Otello asks his wife for un bacio 3 times in a similar passage. It's a doff of the cap from Puccini to Verdi, who had only recently passed away. But when that kiss comes, it is a climactic moment musically, and what you're going to hear in the orchestra is a combination of those 2 themes, a combination of the wilderness and sin theme and a combination done in the rhythm of the redemption theme. And what's going on here? Well, listen to it, and then I'll tell you what it means. What you had there was the chord progression of the wilderness and sin theme done to the rhythm of the redemption theme. And that's because 2 things are going on psychologically here. Minnie, who still sees Dick as her hero and her savior, sees her relationship as a kind of redemption for her life, that she will have the fulfillment that she dreams of, the kind of happy marriage that her parents had. Dick will be her redemption. But Dick, on the other hand, knows that he is living a lie. He knows that he is deceiving her by not telling her that he is Ramirez and not telling her of his love affair with Nina Mitchell-Torena. So in that kiss, he is just filled up with self-loathing and with chaotic emotions relating to his sinful spiritual state. And indeed, he leaves the cabin immediately after giving her that kiss that makes him realize he's unworthy of her. So you have the combination of those 2 motifs. The posse, led by Sheriff Jack Rance, is going to show up, and Dick has to take refuge and hide. And after Jack Rance explains to Minnie exactly who her boyfriend is and leaves, because Minnie has sworn on the Bible that Dick is not there, that she's alone. Dick comes out and now must be shamefully forced to admit the lie that he's been living, that yes, he is Ramirez. But he tells her that when he met her, when he fell in love with her, it made him want to change. He felt ashamed of the life of crime that he'd been living, of all of the gold that he had stolen. He wanted a new life. He wanted to turn the other way. He wants to seek redemption. So here we have the first apotheosis of that redemption theme from the prelude.
preghiera. Oddio, quello non sapia mai, non sapia mai, la mia vergogna mia, il sogno è stata vana. Ora,
Now, Dick's music, as you can see, his solos are the ones that are filled with desperation, with compelling drama, and with that passion that we associate with Puccini's operas. Although, once again, he is deprived of an ovation from the audience because Minnie leaps right in. This is the format that Puccini has chosen to try to find more continuity in his music dramas. Dick is going to have his life in danger. What happens at this point is that rather than following the structure of Madame Butterfly, as we discussed earlier, the rest of Act Two is going to follow the format that Puccini had used in the second act of Tosca. In both cases, we have a baritone who is an authority figure, a lawman. Jack Rance is the sheriff, and Baron Scarpia from Tosca was the chief of police. And both those baritones lust after the soprano, the prima donna. Scarpia lusts for Tosca, and Jack Rance lusts for Minnie. And in both cases, the baritone is going to physically injure the tenor. Baron Scarpia has Cavaradossi tortured to get some information from him. And in Girl of the Golden West, Sheriff Jack Rance, after Dick leaves in shame, he shoots Dick and injures him seriously. Minnie is going to hide Dick, and the sheriff will come in and demand to see him. And in both cases, in Tosca and Girl of the Golden West, the soprano is going to negotiate a transaction with the baritone to save the life of her lover. Tosca offers her body to Scarpia. She will allow him to have sex with her in exchange for sparing the life of her lover Cavaradossi. And in the climax to Act Two of Girl of the Golden West, Minnie negotiates a deal with Jack Rance, a game of poker. Whoever wins 2 out of the 3 hands of poker can have Dick Johnson. She will turn Dick over to Jack Rance if the sheriff wins. She will also offer her body to him, as Tosca does. But if Minnie wins, Jack must leave them alone and leave them in peace. Now, Minnie may not have arias that you recognize as much as you recognize Un bel dì in Visi d'arte, but she has amazing climaxes that require incredible roller coaster emotions and tremendous acting skill. Minnie is going to actually cheat in order to win the poker game. For the third hand, she distracts Jack and pulls some aces and kings out of her stocking. And you'll hear her in this excerpt declare her winning hand, tre asse e un paio, 3 aces and a pair, at which point Jack leaves and Minnie bursts into a volcanic eruption of joy and relief, singing over and over, E mio, he's mine, he's all mine. It's not a famous aria, but it's a very compelling bit of music drama. The third act is one that Puccini departed a bit from the David Belasco play, and of course this was the second consecutive Belasco source material he had used, as Madame Butterfly, of course famously, was also derived from Belasco's play. The third act in Belasco is set back in the Polka Saloon, but Puccini wanted an outdoor setting, so we're in a clearing at the foot of the mountains in a forest of those redwoods and tall pines, and it's sometime later. Dick has been healed from his injuries, but the Wells Fargo agents who have been pursuing him throughout the California territory are hot on his trail, and the chorus gives us a description of the pursuit of Mr. Ashby, who is the representative of Wells Fargo, as he and his men are hunting down Dick. They finally bring him in, bound and gagged, and they're prepared to lynch him on the spot. This is, again, part of that harshness of the lawless and wild, unsettled territory in the mining community, where there's rough and ready justice, no due process. They're going to string Dick up because, after all, he is guilty. These are not trumped-up charges. Dick Johnson is Ramirez. He has been wreaking havoc among the gold miners, stealing from stagecoaches and stealing from saloons like Minnie's. And Dick is prepared. Dick has, in his own mind, he has resolved this duality. In his heart and in his spirit, he is no longer Ramirez. He's prepared to give up his life of crime for a chance at happiness with Minnie. However, that's not helping him right at the moment. With a noose around his neck, he's allowed to give his last words. And this is perhaps the most old-fashioned retro version of an aria that Puccini gives us, although I will tell you that at the end of the aria, Jack Rance again bursts in with some dialogue, depriving, in theory, the audience of a chance to applaud, though I can tell you, usually for this aria, the audience will not be denied, and they do generally give the tenor an ovation, and you'll see why. Dick sings, "Che la mi creda libero e lontano." Let many believe that I'm free, that I made it, that I'm far away, living a life of redenzione, redemption. Now, even though he's singing about redemption, you're not going to hear the redemption motif yet in this aria because Minnie has not saved him yet. That will be a little bit later. Right now, just enjoy this splendid showpiece for a tenor, Che la mi creda. A solo that is often heard in recital and in concert outside of full productions of The Girl of the Golden West. Minnie gets to ride in kind of like Annie Oakley with her guns blazing just before they hang her lover, and she plants herself between the posse and the miners and Dick. And in this finale, again, it's not an aria for Minnie, it's a scene with chorus in which she convinces and persuades all these men that have been coming to her saloon for months now to have mercy on Dick and let him go, because he is a changed man. He has been redeemed. She has seen that he is not Ramirez anymore. And what she's doing is that she's calling in all the favors that she's done. One by one, she'll tell the men, you know, I gave you food when you had a dry spell and hadn't found any gold. I nursed you back to health. I did this for you. And one by one, the men realize that they owe her too much. She has been too large a part of their lives, and they are too much in her debt. And you'll hear them talking amongst themselves as Minnie pleads for Dick's life. And what happens at the conclusion of this passage, the miners themselves will sing that redemption motif as they realize they have no choice but to acknowledge that it's time to let Dick go. It's the apotheosis of that all-important redemption melody. So what do we have here? We have a Puccini opera in which no one dies. Dio mio, how can such a thing be? A happy ending? Well, the miners aren't very happy. As the curtain comes down, they realize that now they're more isolated than ever. It's a tragic ending for them. And as for Minnie and Dick, what lies ahead for them? I'm not so sure. There may be other posses who are after him. He is still a criminal who has not had to face any kind of justice for his crimes that he has committed. He might be shot and killed 2 weeks from now, a month from now, and Minnie is now a fugitive from justice herself. And where are they going to go? They can't hop a Greyhound bus and go to Chicago exactly. But that's okay. The happiness, I believe, lies in the fact not that they'll live to a great old age and have 30 grandchildren, but that Dick has resolved his conflicts. Just as the Mexican-American War that serves as the historical backdrop for this opera produced this tension between Mexican society and American society, that was coalesced in the character of Dick, and he's resolved that now. He is choosing virtue, and he's choosing to be an American, and his conflict is over. In his mind, he has been redeemed. That's the happiness of this opera. Puccini considered this his finest opera. After he wrote it, he was more proud of Girl of the Golden West than any other. Audiences have not particularly shared that same opinion. This opera is performed less often than Tosca, than Butterfly, than Bohème, even Turandot. But it's not because there's any problem with the music. The music is gorgeous, it's thrilling, it's atmospheric, it really works. I think that the more German nature of the musical procedures, the lack of standalone concert pieces, is something that makes it seem different to American audiences from the other earlier operas that have virtual applause signs following the solos that have become so familiar. But don't let that put you off. This is one of the most richly rewarding musical scores in early 20th century opera. The orchestral writing is fabulous and masterful. Puccini may not have been wrong. This may have been, with the acting requirements, the showcase for a fine singing actress in the character of Minnie. This may be an opera that he could feel justly proud of. You should come and see it, and I hope to see you there. Thanks for joining me this afternoon.